It was just supposed to be a quick stop. Valentine's Day was a couple of days away, and Kirsten wanted to pick out cards. She was 15, full of energy, quick to laugh. I told her we could run into Trolley Square before dinner, just the two of us. We parked around 6:40, walked inside, and headed toward the little card shop, the one filled with gag gifts and bright colours. I remember the sound of her voice, teasing me about which cards would make her friends laugh. She was holding one, turning it in her hands. She always liked to pick the silliest things. That's the last normal moment I ever had with my daughter. I heard it before I saw anything. A sound that didn't belong. Pop, pop. I thought maybe something had fallen, or someone broke glass in another store. My brain tried to make it ordinary, but it wasn't. The window next to us shattered. Tiny shards rained into my arm and face. Pain shot through me, sharp, hot. I turned, and that's when I saw him. A boy, just a boy, 18 years old, dressed in black, a shotgun in his hands, his face expressionless, his eyes locked on nothing and on everything. The sound inside that store was like thunder. The first blast hit me in the arm. I spun, my back slamming against the counter. A second shot tore into my shoulder. My lungs filled with fire. I hit the floor, coughing blood. Kirsten screamed, "Mom, get down!" That's the last thing I heard her say. I tried to crawl toward her, just to reach her hand. The floor was slick with blood and glass. My chest felt like it was collapsing. Every breath burned. She was lying just a few feet away, her eyes wide, terrified. He wasn't done. He came closer. The shotgun pressed into my back. The blast tore through me again. It ripped a hole the size of a cantaloupe. My body jerked forward. I couldn't move anymore. And then he turned to my daughter. I saw the barrel swing. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. The sound of the shot still echoes in my head. That's when she was gone. 15 years old. Gone in an instant. The store was silent. My ears rang. My body shook. I tasted iron. I knew I couldn't move, couldn't cry, couldn't breathe without giving myself away. So I stayed still. I thought, if I pretend I'm dead, maybe he'll leave me. Maybe he won't notice I'm still alive. I could hear his footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving away. Then more shots, farther off, echoing through the mall. Screams, running, chaos. I couldn't see him anymore, but I knew he was still there. 3 minutes, that's all it took. 3 minutes for my daughter to die. 3 minutes for my life to change forever. I lay there, barely conscious. The blood pooled around me. My lungs felt like they were filling with water. My heart pounded so loudly it hurt. I thought, this is how it ends. Right here, in this mall I've known since I was a child. This is how I die, but I didn't. Somehow I didn't. I carry the evidence inside me every single day. 300 lead pellets, shards of metal that doctors couldn't take out. Each one a reminder, each one a fragment of that night. Every morning, I wake up with the same thought. I lived. My daughter didn't, and I will never stop living that night. I thought if I stayed still, maybe he wouldn't see me. Maybe he'd think I was already dead. To understand the night of February 12th, 2007, you have to understand where it began. Salt Lake City, a place framed by mountains, known for its quiet streets, its families, its safety. On that Monday evening, Valentine's Day was just 2 days away. Trolley Square Mall, once a historic trolley car barn, had become a gathering place for locals, a mix of boutique shops, antique stores, cafes, and small restaurants. A mall that felt smaller, friendlier than most. People went there not just to shop, but to linger, to walk under the exposed brick walls and iron beams, to enjoy a space that carried a sense of history and neighborhood charm. On that night, the mall was alive with ordinary moments. At Bath and Body Works, a clerk restocked scented candles. At Rodizio Grill, the Brazilian steakhouse, families gathered for dinner. At Cabin Fever, a quirky gift shop near the middle of the square, Valentine's cards filled the racks. This was where Carolyn Tuft and her 15-year-old daughter Kirsten decided to stop. Carolyn was a single mother of 4, a woman who worked hard, raised her children with humour and grit, and loved them fiercely. Her daughter Kirsten was just beginning to step into her own world. A sophomore in high school, she loved music, laughter, and her friends. She was bright, opinionated, and at 15 carried that spark of teenage energy that made every day feel like possibility. To Carolyn, Kirsten was more than a daughter. She was her companion, her confidant, her shadow. That night was meant to be a small slice of time together, just the two of them, a moment carved out of the busy pace of life. But life's darkest chapters don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they begin in the middle of an ordinary day. For Carolyn and Kirsten, it began with the decision to visit Cabin Fever, the card and novelty store tucked inside Trolley Square. They walked through the mall doors just after 6:40 p.m. The air outside was cold, winter sharp. Inside, the warmth of fluorescent light and soft music made the world feel safe. They browsed the racks together. Bright cards, funny trinkets, small things that made Kirsten laugh. And all around them, dozens of other shoppers were caught in their own small, harmless moments. A mother with 2 little children searching for a toy. A man buying chocolates for his wife. A group of young friends headed to a restaurant, each one unaware that in minutes everything would change. At that same moment, just outside the mall, an 18-year-old named Sulejman Talović was moving toward the entrance. Born in Bosnia, a survivor of the war that had torn apart his homeland as a child, he had grown up in Salt Lake City. That night, he carried with him a shotgun and a backpack filled with ammunition. No one knew his motives. No one could guess his intent. He entered quietly, blending into the stream of evening shoppers. Minutes later, the first shots rang out. What began as an ordinary Monday evening in a beloved Salt Lake City landmark would soon become one of Utah's darkest nights. In the middle of laughter, shopping bags, Valentine's plans, and family dinners, death would arrive without warning. And at the very center of it all, a mother and daughter standing side by side in a small store filled with cards. It was the last time Carolyn ever saw her daughter alive. Inside the store, Carolyn and Kirsten were still browsing. They had no reason to notice the boy walking into the mall, a shotgun hidden beneath his coat. They didn't know he had already chambered the first round. At 6:44 p.m., the silence of Trolley Square cracked open. Shoppers froze. Some thought it was construction. Others thought something had fallen. But then the screams began. Sulejman Talović was no longer blending in. He was hunting. He raised the shotgun and fired into the first group he saw. 2 people fell instantly. Others bolted for cover. Witnesses would later describe the sound. Deafening, sharp, echoing against the mall's brick and steel. Every corner of Trolley Square carried the blasts. People ran in every direction. Mothers clutched children. Teenagers dove behind counters. Employees locked doors and turned off lights, praying he wouldn't see them. But the mall's open design offered few hiding places. For Carolyn, the moment was surreal. She remembers looking up, confused, as the first explosions echoed. Then, through the glass windows, she saw him. A boy. Not much older than her daughter. Walking with a shotgun, moving steadily, almost methodically. He pushed through the doors of Cabin Fever. And then the blasts came. Carolyn felt the force before she heard it. Metal tore through her side, ripping into her body. She fell hard to the floor, pain erupting, breath leaving her lungs. Next to her, Kirsten collapsed. A 15-year-old girl, struck in an instant. The store filled with smoke and screams. Another customer, trying to shield himself, was cut down. Carolyn remembers the sensation, Heat, confusion, the world spinning. And then, instinct. She pulled herself across the floor, closer to her daughter. Kirsten's eyes were open, wide with fear. She was gasping. Carolyn reached for her hand. And then more shots. Talović moved back into the mall corridors. He fired at random, reloading calmly, steadily. Witnesses said his face never changed. No expression, no hesitation. At Radizio Grill, diners heard the blast before they saw him. A father shielded his children beneath the table as pellets tore through the glass. At a clothing store, employees herded customers into back rooms, barricading doors with racks and hangers. Some shoppers ran outside, others hid in bathrooms, closets, behind counters. But wherever he turned, Talović fired. Multiple shots fired. Trolley Square Mall. Unknown suspect. Units respond immediately. Salt Lake City Police received the first call within minutes. Officers rushed toward the mall, but even as sirens cut through the night air, inside the building, the shooting continued. Carolyn had been hit again. Dozens of shotgun pellets tore through her. Her body was broken, her vision fading. She realized she could no longer move. And then she heard Kirsten's voice, faint, weak. Her daughter called for her. Carolyn tried to reach. She tried to speak, but the strength was gone. Kirsten's breathing slowed, and then it stopped. Carolyn lay still. She told herself, "Don't move, don't breathe. If he thinks you're dead, maybe he'll leave you alive." Survivors across the mall made the same decision. Hide, stay still, pretend to be dead. In the card shop, bodies were scattered across the floor. In the grill, families pressed themselves beneath tables, praying he wouldn't turn their way. Minutes passed. Shots rang again and again. Outside, the first officers entered. They didn't wait for backup. One of them, an off-duty Ogden City police officer named Ken Hammond, had been eating dinner with his wife inside the mall when the gunfire began. He ran toward the sound, pistol drawn. Inside the corridors, Hammond confronted Talović. He fired. Talović fired back. The gun battle began. Backup arrived. Salt Lake City officers, heavily armed, sweeping the mall one corridor at a time. The shooter retreated deeper inside, exchanging fire with police. For the dozens still trapped inside, the sound of gunfire meant hope and terror all at once. Somewhere in the dark, their only chance of survival was unfolding. On the floor of Cabin Fever, Carolyn was barely conscious. Her daughter lay beside her. She could hear boots, gunshots, shouting, but she didn't dare move. She waited, bleeding, broken, alive. At 6:59 p.m., less than 15 minutes after the first shot, police closed in. They surrounded the gunman near the mall's back corridor. In a storm of gunfire, Sulejman Talović was shot and killed. The rampage was over. 5 people were dead, 4 more critically injured, families torn apart in an instant. And among the survivors, a mother who had lost her daughter and who carried more than 300 pellets from a shotgun blast inside her body. By 7 p.m., the gunfire had stopped. The shooter was dead. Officers moved methodically, room by room, clearing the mall. Survivors were escorted out, their faces pale, their hands trembling. But inside, the echoes of what had just happened lingered. Glass, shell casings, blood on the tile. The crime scene was massive, a historic shopping centre transformed into a battlefield in less than 15 minutes. Investigators began the long process of piecing it together. Who was the boy with the shotgun? Why here? Why these people? His name was Sulejman Talović. 18 years old, lived less than 15 minutes away. He wasn't on anyone's radar. No criminal record, no warning signs that law enforcement had seen. But the more they learned, the more questions surfaced. Talović had been born in Bosnia in 1988, a child of war. At 4 years old, he fled with his family during the Bosnian conflict, resettling in Utah as refugees. Friends described him as quiet, withdrawn, someone who didn't fit in, who kept to himself. In high school, he slipped through unnoticed. No one thought of him as violent. No one suspected what he carried inside. But his family's past, the trauma of war, the memories of violence in Bosnia, was never far behind. And yet, even knowing this, investigators struggled to explain one thing: why he chose that night. Why he walked into a mall with a shotgun and began killing strangers. While investigators traced his past, hospitals across Salt Lake City filled with survivors. Carolyn Tuft was rushed into emergency surgery. Her body carried over 300 shotgun pellets. The blast had shredded her lungs, liver, and kidney. Doctors worked desperately to keep her alive. She would later describe waking up in the ICU disoriented, her body wrapped in tubes and bandages. Her first thought: where is Kirsten? The answer came quietly. Her daughter hadn't survived. Kirsten Hinckley was 15. She had gone to the mall to shop for Valentine's cards with her mother. She never came home. Her friends and classmates gathered at the school the next morning, stunned. A desk sat empty. A community grieved. For Carolyn, survival was its own prison. Every breath was agony. Every thought, the memory of her daughter's last moments. Meanwhile, law enforcement faced the press. The questions came fast. Who was he? Why did he do it? Was he working with anyone else? Chief Chris Burbank of the Salt Lake City Police Department admitted the truth. They didn't know. Talović had carried more than 100 rounds of ammunition. He seemed prepared for a prolonged massacre, but there was no manifesto, no note, no clear motive. Was it terrorism? A grudge? Mental illness? The answer to this day has never been found. For survivors, the lack of explanation only deepened the wounds. One man described lying still for 20 minutes in a restaurant, pretending to be dead as glass shattered above him. Another told reporters he watched strangers fall, unable to move or help. Carolyn's story, a mother shielding her daughter, losing her in front of her eyes, carrying the weight of survival, became one of the most searing symbols of that night. At vigils, candles flickered. Families held photographs. Names of the dead were read aloud. Jeffrey Walker, 52. Teresa Ellis, 29. Kirsten Hinckley, 15. And others who never left the mall alive. In most true crime stories, there is a courtroom, a trial, a search for justice. But in Trolley Square, the trial ended the moment police opened fire. The gunman was dead, and so there would be no cross-examination, no testimony, no chance to ask the one question that haunted everyone. Why? For Carolyn, life after the mall was a series of surgeries, recoveries, and reminders. Pellets remain inside her body to this day, constant, painful evidence of what happened. Every breath costs her. Every movement reminds her. She once said, "It's like carrying him inside me every day, like the shooting never ended." But worse than the pain was the loss. Her daughter's absence was a wound no surgery could mend. Investigators closed their files. They called the case solved. The shooter was dead, the danger gone. But for the survivors, nothing was solved, because the story of Trolley Square is not a story of answers. It is a story of scars, of lives torn open, of a mother who lived, but would forever ask, why did she not? Every crime seeks a courtroom. Every massacre begs for justice. But when the gunman dies in a storm of bullets, there is no defendant. There are no opening statements, no witnesses taking the stand, no verdict at the end. And yet in Salt Lake City, the people demanded answers. So the trial moved elsewhere, into the streets, into the newspapers, into living rooms across Utah. A trial without a defendant, a trial without a judge, a trial in the court of public opinion. In the days after February 12th, investigators laid out what little they knew. Sulejman Talović was Samnist. No criminal record, no note, no demands, no manifesto. Just a boy with a shotgun, a backpack full of ammunition, and a body count of 5 innocent lives. But to the public, this wasn't enough. Speculation filled the void. Was it terrorism? Was it revenge? Was it the ghost of Bosnia's war, bleeding into the quiet streets of Utah? Some pointed to his childhood in a war zone. Others blamed America's easy access to guns. Theories swirled, none satisfied. For survivors like Carolyn, these debates felt hollow. She didn't need speculation. She needed justice. But justice was gone, lying on the cold tile of the mall where police bullets had ended it. She was left with 300 pellets inside her body, and no one to hold accountable. If there had been a trial, the testimony might have sounded like this. A mother describing her daughter's last breath. Shoppers describing the sound of shotguns echoing in narrow corridors. Police officers recounting the chaos, the firefight, the split-second decisions that saved dozens of lives. The jury would have seen the photographs. Bloodstains across Valentine's cards. Broken glass glinting under fluorescent lights. A shopping centre transformed into carnage. And then the prosecutor would have asked the simplest, hardest question. Why? And there would have been silence. Because no one, not investigators, not his family, not his friends, could answer it. Without a courtroom, the people put Talović himself on trial. Neighbours whispered about his odd behaviour, his isolation. Classmates said he never smiled, never spoke. Friends, few as they were, said he was lonely, but not violent. Even his family sat in disbelief. His aunt told reporters, "We are shocked. We don't understand. We cannot explain this." But in the court of public opinion, disbelief was no defence. Some shifted the trial toward law enforcement. Had police acted fast enough? Had the mall been prepared for an attack? But in this courtroom, the verdict was clear. Officers had rushed in, confronted the shooter, and stopped him in under 15 minutes. They had saved lives. If there was fault, it wasn't theirs. So the trial shifted again, to society itself. Parents asked, how could an 18-year-old acquire guns so easily? Community leaders asked, why were warning signs ignored? Reporters asked, could this happen again? But like every other witness called to the stand, these questions answered nothing. For Carolyn Tuft, there is only one trial that matters. Every day she puts herself on the stand. Could she have shielded her daughter more? Could she have moved faster? Could she have taken the blast instead? No jury, no judge, just a mother cross-examining herself. It is the cruelest trial of all, and it never ends. The legal system had no defendant. The city had no answers. The families had no justice. The trial that never happened is still happening. In memories, in scars, in questions that will never be answered. And so the case of Trolley Square remains open, not in law, but in the lives of those who carry it. The gunfire ended in less than 15 minutes, but the silence that followed has lasted for years. 5 people were dead. 4 more were critically injured. Dozens lived with invisible wounds. And an entire community was left asking, why? The truth, when it finally came, wasn't satisfying. It wasn't clean. It wasn't justice. It was something darker, something harder to live with. When Carolyn Tuft opened her eyes in the hospital, the world was unrecognizable. Her body was torn apart. Doctors had removed part of her liver, part of her kidney. Pellets still riddled her lungs. Every breath was agony. Every word came in whispers. And when she asked about Kirsten, the room went still. Her daughter was gone. Carolyn had survived the unspeakable, but survival came with a price. She would live the rest of her life with more than 300 shotgun pellets inside her. fragments of lead embedded in tissue, bone, and organs, too dangerous to remove, too painful to ignore. Doctors told her she would never fully heal, that her body would always carry the evidence of that night. Carolyn once said, "It's like carrying him inside me every single day." Like the shooting never ended. Salt Lake City mourned together. At vigils, candles flickered against the cold February air. Families read the names aloud. Friends laid flowers beneath the brick walls of Trolley Square. Strangers wept for people they had never met. And everywhere, the same question hung in the silence. Why them? Investigators scoured every detail of Sulejman Talović's life. They traced his steps that day, buying ammunition, loading his guns, walking calmly to the mall. They interviewed his family, who wept in disbelief. His aunt told reporters, "We are shocked. We do not understand. We cannot explain this." They searched for connections, to terrorism, to gangs, to grudges. None came. The only truth they uncovered was emptiness. Talović had no manifesto, no note, no explanation, just silence. And so the community was left with a different kind of horror. A crime with no motive. For the survivors, the scars were both visible and hidden. One man carried buckshot in his spine. Another lived with nightmares so vivid he couldn't walk into public places. For children who had hidden under tables or behind racks, the sound of fireworks now triggered panic. For the families of the dead, every holiday became a reminder. Every Valentine's Day, a wound that reopened. For Carolyn, survival became its own trial. She fought through surgeries, fought through pain, fought through years of recovery. But the hardest battles were in her own mind. Could she have pulled her daughter closer? Could she have shielded her better? Could she have taken the full blast herself? She carried the guilt as fiercely as she carried the pain. A mother forever cross-examining herself, with no verdict to end the trial. Eventually, the mall reopened. New stores came. Life returned to its halls. But for many, it was no longer a place of joy. It was a place of ghosts. Every corner carried memory. Every echo of laughter was shadowed by the echo of gunfire. Salt Lake City moved forward, but it never forgot. In John Grisham's world, cases end with verdicts. The guilty are punished. The innocent are freed. Justice, even if flawed, is delivered. But in the case of Trolley Square, there was no trial, no verdict, no justice. The shooter died. His secrets died with him. The only truth that remains lives in the bodies of survivors, in the memories of families, in the silence of questions never answered. And so the final twist is this. Justice was never served, the truth was never spoken, and the people left behind were forced to carry the weight themselves. I survived. But sometimes I wonder if I did, because so much of me stayed on that floor beside my daughter. In the end, the system closed its files. The city buried its dead. The mall reopened its doors. But for those who lived it, February 12th, 2007 never ended, because justice is just a word. The truth? That's something they carry, alone. When the shooting stopped and the mall finally fell silent, Salt Lake City was never the same again. The echoes of February 12th, 2007, the gunfire, the screams, the silence, are woven into the fabric of this city, stitched into the lives of those who survived and those who never returned home. For Carolyn Tuft, survival has been a paradox. Doctors removed what they could, but hundreds of pellets, over 300, remain lodged inside her body. A daily reminder of what happened. She suffers chronic pain, nerve damage, complications that make even simple tasks difficult. The blast from that shotgun did not just take her daughter. It reshaped every single day of her life. And yet it is not the physical pain that weighs heaviest. It is the memory of looking over and realizing her 15-year-old daughter was gone. Kirsten Hinckley should have grown older. She should have graduated, fallen in love, built a life. Instead, her story was cut short in the aisle of a card store. Her future compressed into photographs and memories that her family holds onto with fragile hands. For Carolyn and for Kirsten's siblings, there is no moving on, only moving forward, carrying absence with them wherever they go. For the city of Salt Lake, the aftermath has been marked by one word. Why? Why did an 18-year-old with no clear history of crime enter a shopping mall and open fire on strangers? Why them? Why there? The questions came quickly, but the answers never followed. There was no manifesto, no letter, no explanation from the shooter, only silence. Investigators scoured every detail of Sulejman Talovic's life. His childhood in Bosnia, his years in Utah, his quiet demeanor, but nothing revealed a clear motive, no hatred expressed, no demands made, no reason given. He carried a shotgun and a backpack filled with ammunition. He entered the mall and he killed. And then, when confronted by police, he was killed himself. The only person who knew why is gone, and so the silence remains. For the families of the 5 who died, life split into 2 eras, before February 12th and after. Every birthday became a reminder. Every holiday carried a shadow. Every gathering was marked by the presence of absence. Some found strength in community, holding vigils, supporting survivors, fighting for memory. Others carried their grief quietly, in silence in private. But all were changed. Permanently. I lost my daughter, and I lost the life I once knew. I'm still here, but sometimes it feels like he took me too. Those words are the truest sentence of Trolley Square. The survivors are the sentence. They live each day carrying what happened. Their punishment is not written in law books, but in the scars on their bodies and the emptiness in their homes. Even now, the city remembers. When the anniversary approaches, candles are lit. Names are read. Tears fall, quietly, among strangers who never forgot. The mall still stands. The shops still open their doors. Life continues, but for those who were there, the echoes never fade. The shooting at Trolley Square is not a case closed. It is not a story finished. It is an open wound. It is a haunting silence. It is the memory of a daughter who never came home, and a mother who still carries her pain like a second skin. In the end, justice never came to Trolley Square. The gunman left no reason, no words, no trace of meaning, only scars. The truth is this: sometimes the most haunting crimes are not the ones we solve, but the ones that leave us with silence.